Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Hamilton Morris, the forensic investigator who turned underground psychedelic journalism into institutional pharmacological science.
Right. And as you sit here listening today on May 5th, 2026, you probably have a very specific, almost conditioned image in your head when you think about psychoactive substances.
Oh, completely. Decades of news reports have taught you to look at a bag of white powder and see, a demon or a moral failing.
Or criminal enterprise. Or maybe the total opposite, like a blissed out counterculture figure just searching for spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, you project all of those cultural anxieties right onto the molecule itself. But Hamilton Morris, he forces you to shatter both of those archetypes.
He really does. He looks at that exact same white powder and, well, he just sees structure. He sees carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen atoms bound together.
Exactly. He sees this long history of human desire, and he is arguably the man who killed the rampant drug paranoia of the early 2000s.
And he did it using a mass spectrometer, and just an absolute refusal to look away from objective facts.
Right, so our mission for this deep dive is to map exactly how that happened. How does the son of a famous documentary filmmaker navigate from these decentralized digital drug forums?
All the way to the corporate boardrooms of Big Pharma.
Yes, and how he does it without compromising the raw truth of the chemistry. Because to understand how his mind was engineered for this, you really have to look at where he comes from.
Oh, for sure. Born in New York City, April 1987, and raised in that intensely competitive academic ecosystem of Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Right, he didn't just emerge out of nowhere. He was essentially built in a laboratory of intellectual intensity by his parents.
You really can't decode him without looking directly at his father, Errol Morris.
The legendary documentarian who directed The Thin Blue Line.
Exactly. Errol is famous for inventing the Interrotron. It's this complex system of mirrors that lets an interviewee look directly into the camera lens.
Which totally strips away that artificial feeling of television, right? It creates this deeply uncomfortable intimacy.
Yeah, Errol hunted the truth until it bled. He spent hundreds of hours interviewing the infamous body snatcher, Ed Geim.
Wow, just trying to understand the mechanics of his psychosis.
Right, and that level of obsessive forensic commitment to subjects that society deems macabre, that left a huge mark on Hamilton.
It engineered his willingness to enter highly stigmatized pharmacological spaces without an ounce of judgment. And there's also this fascinating physical detail about his father.
You mean the head of business?
Yeah, Errol suffers from strabismus, which limits his sight in one eye. Hamilton has actually pointed out how this influenced his father's unique, almost flattened way of seeing the world.
Which draws a direct line to Hamilton's own meticulous, almost obsessive attention to visual detail in his work.
Right, and then you couple that with his mother, Julia Sheehan, who is an art historian. So you get this highly specific DNA.
Relentless forensic inquiry, paired with a really deep aesthetic appreciation. He grew up in a house where the pursuit of truth was, like, the only valid religion.
And that totally explains his early comfort with the lens. By 2002, as a teenager, he's already in an ad for the very first generation Apple iPod.
But he wasn't looking to be a traditional media personality. He heads to the University of Chicago and then the New School, earning a BS in liberal arts.
But with a very deliberate, highly specific double major, anthropology and chemistry.
Which is brilliant.
It is. Think about it like a computer scientist building a system. You can't just study the hardware, the physical molecule, the bonds, the synthesis.
You have to study the software, too.
Exactly. The human culture using it, the rituals, the societal impact. He was studying both the code and the machine.
And we should emphasize a crucial distinction for you listening at home. Morris was a massive geek who was initially terrified of tripping.
Right. He fell in love with the hard science long before he ever sampled the product.
He's a rigorous scientist who eventually became a psychonaut, not the other way around. He wasn't a psychonaut who decided to learn a little chemistry to justify a weekend habit.
That distinction changes his whole trajectory, because during the peak of the drug war, when government media was just screaming pure propaganda at you,
he was spending his youth on decentralized digital archives, like Blue Light and Arrowwood,
which were the only place on the internet providing raw, unvarnished data about dosage and chemical synthesis.
He saw the massive gulf between prohibition messaging and actual pharmacology, and he stepped right into that void.
Which brings us to 2008, a huge career turning point. He pitches a story to Vice magazine called The Magic Jews.
documenting his experience taking LSD with Hasidic Jews in Crown Heights.
It was this wild collision of the sacred and the synthetic. Vice immediately recognized that he had this intense forensic gaze from his father, paired with total fearlessness,
So by 2009, they hand him a monthly column called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia.
which moved to VBS.TV and then Viceland. And the title itself is a brilliant contradiction, right?
Yeah, Pharmacopoeia implies this strict clinical medical authority, yet he was operating in the absolute gutter of immersive investigative journalism.
But starting with season 1 in 2016, what made the show revolutionary was how he systematically dismantled the mechanics of drug myths. Look at PCP.
Oh, the PCP episode is an absolute masterclass in forensic cultural criticism. You grew up hearing these viral myths about users having superhuman strength.
We're suddenly turning into flesh-eating monsters.
Right, and Morris interrogates that stigma directly, not just culturally, but mechanically. He meets with users like the artist Timothy Wiley.
Who used the substance strictly as a tool for artistic creation.
But more importantly, Morris points out the actual pharmacology. PCT was originally developed in the 1950s by Park Davis as an intravenous anesthetic under the brand name Cernal.
And it does not cause respiratory depression. He frames it as a breakthrough anesthetic that was simply ruined by social panic.
He exposes the deep hypocrisy there. A culture that completely panics over PCP, yet enthusiastically embraces alcohol.
Which absolutely causes respiratory depression and kills countless people. And he didn't stop there. He traveled to South Africa to document the mandrax or methaqualone epidemic.
And he didn't just point a camera at addicted people. He exposed the dangerous use of a specific chemical precursor called otoluidine in the clandestine synthesis.
Right. When underground chemists fail to properly wash the final product, it leaves behind this highly toxic, carcinogenic precursor.
He showed that the danger was in the unregulated chemistry, not necessarily the baseline drug.
Then he goes to Mexico to document the Mazatec use of salvia divinorum. And he points out its highly unique, non-alkaloid pharmacology via salvinorin A.
Let's translate why salvinorin A matters mechanically for a second. Most classic psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin are alkaloids.
Meaning they contain basic nitrogen atoms, right?
Exactly, and they target the serotonin receptors in your brain, but salvinorin A has no basic nitrogen. It is structurally completely different.
It targets the kappa opioid receptor instead.
Yeah. Right. And by explaining that exact mechanism, Morris directly contradicted the viral YouTube scare videos at the time.
He was teaching an entire generation to be pharmacologically literate, proving that negative effects are usually the result of ignorance, improper dosing, or prohibition itself.
And by season 2 in 2018, his ethnopharmacological search goes even deeper. He travels to Thailand to investigate kratom.
Analyzing its mechanical similarity to the pharmaceutical drug tramadol, he argued for its legality as a critical harm reduction tool.
He even goes to Madagascar to eat hallucinogenic fish, documenting a dizzying medical condition called ichthyole inotoxism.
Okay, but I have to stop you there, because I'm looking at this and thinking, wasn't he actually part of the problem sometimes?
What do you mean?
Well, in journalism, you always have the observer effect. The sheer act of documenting something inherently changes it. And didn't that blow up in his face with the toad crisis?
Yes. He makes this beautiful documentary about synthesizing 5-MeO-DMT from the secretions of the Bufo alvarius toad.
And what happens? He accidentally triggers a massive poaching crisis. How does he reconcile that?
That is the ultimate double-edged sword of what he does. He brought the secretive underground into the bright light of mainstream media, and the light almost burned it down.
His documentary created this massive surge in demand from people wanting a profound spiritual experience, and it decimated the toad populations in the Sonoran Desert.
But this is exactly where you see his true maturation. He didn't just issue a PR apology and walk away. He realized that passive observation wasn't enough.
Right. He aggressively pivoted his entire platform to advocate for the use of synthetic 5-MeO-DMT to protect the toads.
He proved that the lab-made molecule is functionally identical to the toad secretion. He took active responsibility for directing the culture towards sustainability.
But that crisis proved something terrifying to Morris. A camera can expose a problem, but it cannot synthesize a solution.
To actually save the toad and correct the scientific record, he couldn't just be a journalist anymore. He had to go back to the laboratory.
Season 3, released in 2021, is widely considered the most technically dense season in television history.
He's working with legendary chemists like David E. Nichols on novel lysergamides, which are basically structural cousins to LSD.
And exploring the overlap between ibogaine and tramadol. But the real paradigm shift was his work on bufotenate, or 5-HO-DMT.
The bufotenate breakthrough is monumental. For decades, the institutional medical establishment dismissed bufotenate as nothing more than a toxic cardiovascular stimulant.
They basically considered it pharmacological junk.
Exactly. But Morris partners with the legendary ethnobotanist Jonathan Ott. And through rigorous self-experimentation, pure bioassay, he completely rehabilitates it.
He proves that pure bufotenate is actually a valid, highly visual psychedelic.
By proving it was a missing link between DMT and 5-MeO-DMT, he wasn't just moving molecules around on a whiteboard.
No, he was proving the medical establishment had completely misunderstood a tool that could profoundly shift human consciousness. He proved the experts wrong by testing it on himself.
But that brings up a huge point of friction.
Yeah, because the modern medical establishment categorically rejects bioassay. They view self-experimentation as anecdotal at best and, wildly reckless at worst.
Why is bioassay considered a dirty word in modern medicine when for Morris it's clearly a rigorous forensic tool?
Well, it comes down to a fundamental clash of methodologies. Institutional science demands double-blind, placebo-controlled, objective, quantitative data.
They want numbers on a chart. But psychoactive substances produce inherently subjective, qualitative experiences.
Right. A mass spectrometer can give you the exact molecular weight of a compound, but it cannot tell you what the geometry of the hallucination looks like.
It can't measure how it shifts your perception of time or heals a lingering trauma. Bioassay isn't just taking a drug to see what happens.
It's a meticulous protocol. You start with threshold doses, microgram by microgram. You measure your blood pressure, your heart rate, your body temperature.
Morris recognized that cold clinical data completely misses the actual human effect, and he inherited this methodology directly from his absolute hero, Alexander Sasha Shulgin.
Shulgin, the medicinal chemist who famously rediscovered MDMA and synthesized over 200 novel psychedelic compounds in his backyard lab.
Morris has referred to Shulgin as his hero, son, and oxygen. He even conducted Sasha's final long-form interview before his death in 2014.
Morris sees self-experimentation not as recreation, but as an essential scientific duty to correct the record where rigid institutions fail.
But he wasn't just a rogue actor working in his garage. He spent a decade partnering with Jason Wallach at St. Joseph's University,
which is the oldest pharmacy school in America. That academic legitimacy is what makes Morris so formidable. He can bridge both worlds.
He and Wallach co-authored a highly technical toxicology paper on MXP back in 2015.
And by 2023, they co-authors a landmark study in Nature Communications. They identified that serotonergic psychedelics mediate their specific effects via the GQ signaling pathway of the 5-HT2A receptor.
Hold on, let's translate that for the listener because that is incredibly dense.
Okay, so the 5-HT2A receptor in your brain is basically a biological switchboard. And Morris helped figure out exactly which wire triggers the hallucination versus which wire treats the depression.
Precisely. The 5-HT2A receptor is the main target for classic psychedelics. It's a protein sitting on the surface of your brain cells.
And when a psychedelic molecule binds to that receptor, it doesn't just push one button, right?
No, it activates multiple signaling pathways inside the cell. One pathway might cause the profound visual trip, while another pathway, like the GQ signaling pathway, might be responsible for neuroplasticity
and the antidepressant effects. By isolating these mechanisms, Morris and his team provided the exact mechanical roadmap,
which allows future chemists to potentially design therapeutics that deliver the mental health benefits without sending the patient on a 12-hour hallucination.
That research is the absolute frontier of mental health treatment today in 2026. And while he was building this massive institutional credibility, he was doing something else too.
Building a highly secure vault to preserve the oral history of the clandestine underground.
Yes, the Hamilton Morris podcast. It operates completely on a Patreon model, ensuring total editorial independence.
No corporate sponsors, no network executives telling him what is or isn't safe to air.
He's capturing the clandestine conversations that the sanitized biotech world desperately wants to ignore. He interviews people like Stephen Watt, discussing the nuances of cybercrime while on ketamine.
Or Methyl Man, talking about the logistics of multi-ton MDMA synthesis. He even uncovered the anonymous source who claimed to have sold LSD to Steve Jobs.
He's actively serving as the archivist for the Shulgin generation. He has a profound reverence for underground chemists.
People like Ken Nelson, who wrote the original pamphlet on the Sonoran Desert Toad,
Yes.
or Steve Gill, an MDMA pioneer whose entire life was destroyed by prohibition.
But I have to push back here, because this brings up a really difficult dilemma for you as a listener. Morris used his massive platform to actively raise money for the Free Fester fundraiser.
Supporting the legal defense of Uncle Fester, Steve Kreisler.
A man who literally wrote the book, Secrets of Methamphetamine Manufacture. I mean, how do you reconcile a respected institutional scientist, a guy publishing in Nature Communications, raising funds for an underground meth chemist?
Well, it forces you to confront your own hypocrisies about chemical knowledge. For Morris, funding that defense is not an endorsement of methamphetamine addiction.
Or the social destruction it causes, right?
Right. It's about an uncompromising commitment to pure chemical knowledge. He fundamentally believes that the suppression of information is always far more dangerous than the information itself.
Chemistry is just the mechanics of the universe. It doesn't have a moral alignment.
His loyalty is to the objective truth of the science and the freedom to share it, regardless of how socially unpalatable those figures might be to the mainstream public.
And that friction perfectly explains the tragedy of his transition. Because in 2021, Morris makes a massive pivot.
He leaves the media world and transitions to biotechnology, joining Compass Pathways as a chemistry consultant.
To develop clinical-stage psilocybin treatments. And the backlash from his core audience was immediate and severe.
Activist groups like Symposia accused him of selling out. They claimed he abandoned his independent roots to protect corporate interests.
And that he was betraying the open-source ethics of Shurgin by helping a massive company patent molecules.
That backlash is the exact tension tearing the psychedelic renaissance apart right now. You have the utopian, open-source ideals of the underground colliding head-on with the harsh, patent-driven reality of modern medical infrastructure.
But Morris dismissed the criticism with pure, unapologetic pragmatism.
He argued that the for-profit medical model, despite all of its massive flaws, is the only viable, scalable path to widespread accessibility.
You simply cannot treat millions of people suffering from depression with a backyard lab. Corporate infrastructure is the only mechanism powerful enough to actually push these therapeutics through the FDA.
The criticism of him selling out always felt incredibly short-sighted, honestly.
Think about it like this. If you spend your entire life mapping a labyrinth from the inside, just to show people that it's safe to navigate.
Eventually, you have to partner with the architects who actually own the maze.
Exactly. If you ever want to officially open the doors to the public.
Yeah.
But that is the ultimate tragedy of a bridge figure like Morris.
He's too scientific and rigorous for the hippie purists, and he's entirely too radical for the corporate suits.
It leaves him mathematically isolated.
Isolated, perhaps, but philosophically unwavering. His philosophy fundamentally challenges both the prohibitionists locking people in cages and the psychedelic elitists who think they own enlightenment.
He champions a concept called drug instrumentalization. He posits that drugs are not demonic entities, but they also aren't magic.
They're simply instruments. Just like you might use caffeine to enhance your focus at work, non-addictive drug use is a functional adaptation.
It's a goal-directed behavior used by humans across all of history to alter their mental states for a specific purpose. And he firmly rejects drug elitism.
Aggressively opposes it. This gatekeeping idea that psychedelics are only valid if used in some sacred shamanic context with a singing bowl.
He advocates for a laissez-faire approach. As long as no harm is done, people should be free to use these instruments however they see fit.
He proves time and time again that pharmacological literacy is the antidote to fear. When the media panics over a new drug, it's almost always driven by novelty or contamination.
And the inherently dangerous conditions created by prohibition itself. Look at his legacy as of today.
His work on Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia has been translated into 47 countries with over 100 million views. Major universities teach his methodologies.
He took the hysterical myths of the media and dismantled them with a mass spectrometer. He stepped into the absolute abyss of the human brain, found a molecular structure, and he didn't blink.
He just documented the truth. He brought the secrets of the clandestine lab into the sterile light of the university.
Which leaves you with a final, provocative reality to ponder. Morris successfully forced the culture to grow up. He is no longer making television. He's making medicine at Compass Pathways, pushing the boundaries of receptor signaling at the Wallach lab. But as you sit here in 2026, you have to ask yourself, what happens when the medicine is finally legal, but the mystery is completely gone?
When the wild, open-source spirit of the Shulgin era is replaced by FDA trials, sterile clinics, and venture capital boardrooms.
Is the sanitized corporate future of consciousness actually worth the sacrifice of the clandestine underground?
That is the burden of the torchbearer. He gave us the analytical tools to be free. Now we have to see if the institutions will actually let us use them.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.